Yeah.
Let's begin with the first question, and that is, why is it so important to focus on legal assistance for refugees?
I guess the importance of focusing on legal assistance comes from the fact that we have millions of refugees around the globe, and some of the struggles that they're facing is that when they arrive to a host state, the host state has a whole set of complicated legal procedures in order to accept them as asylum seekers, and then to finally determine whether or not they can get status in that country. And these are procedures and systems that only very specialized lawyers can navigate. And without legal assistance, the refugees will end up in a situation where they'll face, increasingly we're seeing detention and of course deportation, and oftentimes deportation back to situations where they will face a danger, a threat to their life, to their security, to their safety.
As we have seen in the conference, with the Egypt example, yes. What do you think that are the major challenges before us, and how can we overcome them?
The way that I see it, actually, I think the main challenge is not just limited to the issue of legal advocacy and legal support, but actually in tackling the political and economic issues that create refugees, that create the trigger displacement. And I think this is one thing that's often missing. Sort of a finding of a person as eligible for refugee status is very important for that individual, but on the larger level, it's dealing with the political and economic issues that have displaced them to begin with, that is the only thing that can be called a solution. And I think that it's a much tougher issue because it involves engaging, especially northern states, Europe and North America, on their foreign policies, on their economic policies, on the fact that they've placed profit before people. And I think these are the much tougher issues to tackle, but the essential issues to tackle when talking about refugees.
Yes. I heard you also during the conference talking about implementing mechanisms in order to ensure the rights of the refugees, and in this case, in your case, then the Palestinian refugees. But the question would be then, how can you implement such a mechanism? Once you've created a mechanism, how do you want it to be implemented? Of course, you have to look at a political situation, political factors, but what is, in your view, the best solution to implement such a mechanism to ensure the rights of the refugees?
So specifically in the case of Palestinian refugees are people who've been expelled over the past 62 years. The large majority of them were expelled in 1948 and have been struggling to return to the places from which they were expelled since then. The only reason that they're not allowed back is because of the racist ideology behind the State of Israel, which says that Israel is a state for the Jewish people and only the Jewish people. And this is the main reason why Palestinian refugees who are not Jewish are not allowed to go home. The mechanism that we're calling for is that, given that the international community has recognized Palestinian refugees' right to return, which is not an exceptional finding, all refugees have a right to return under human rights law and various other bodies of law. The main obstacle is the State of Israel, which is refusing their return. And so Israel must be held accountable for this violation, this grave violation of international law. And so this mechanism, unfortunately, is not being carried out by states. For the past 62 years, states have been willing to verbally and at the United Nations vote in favor of Palestinian refugee rights. But when it comes to enforcement mechanisms and actually challenging Israel on its racist policies, states have fallen short. As such, we are calling on international civil society to fill in that void that their states have left through working on campaigns of boycotts, divestment, and sanctions against Israel until it complies with international law. And these campaigns are continually growing and actually beginning to reach state-level policies, where we're beginning to see some states beginning to divest from or withdraw their investments from certain companies engaged in Israeli war crimes and crimes against humanity. but there's still a great deal more to do before Israel will actually comply with international law. And we've seen Israel's impunity in action just in the past month,
Yes.
when Israel boarded the Freedom Flotilla ships and opened fire on the passengers.
Yes. And are such conferences and exchanges of information useful to your own project? And if so, in what way?
Yeah, so they're useful in several ways. The first way is we are able to, through a conference like this, to share our history, on which there's a great deal of ignorance, unfortunately. To share the idea that Palestinian refugees are not exceptional, but that Israel has been treated in an exceptional way. And as such, Palestinian refugees should be considered the way that all other refugees are considered, with the same rights to return, restitution, compensation. And also to hear about the other experiences of lawyers and experts and advocates from other parts of the world, and the way that they're dealing with legal issues that are at their core political and economic issues. And so we get to share ideas and to share knowledge about the different cases that people are working on. For example, one of the participants in this conference is working on preparing a very useful tool, a very useful website that I hope we will be able to engage with, also to provide information to others working on Palestinian refugee cases. And this is a website that's supposed to help with legal advocates with information and with networks and with access to experts. That is something that we hopefully can provide, but also something that we can definitely make use of.
So it was very useful for you.
Yes, definitely.
Well, thank you for the interview.